China's doing it again. Here we go.
Let's
American laws and American standards and upholding American values. I'm sure if you dug around and looked around, you'd find that J.P. Morgan wasn't alone in that kind of practice.
J.P. Morgan Chase later admitted the Sons and Daughters program violated the U.S. Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, FCPA, and it paid more than $200 million in settlements to avoid further investigation and prosecution.
Through the exchange of benefits, the Western companies get special treatment from the parents of the second generation of Reds. In return, they are plainly using their power for money.
Western values have had little influence on the CCP, while many Westerners have learned the values and bad behaviors of the CCP.
Jamie Dimon, CEO of J.P. Morgan Chase, is the chairman of a powerful lobby, Business Roundtable. Dimon strongly opposed increasing tariffs on Chinese products in 2018 when the White House imposed measures amid the trade war. The measures were aimed at stopping the CCP's trade practices that undermine the global trade order.
We should try to be friendly and understand their problems.
Dimon is not alone. The elites on Wall Street have frequently lobbied for Beijing and Washington over the past few decades. The Tiananmen Square Democratic Movement was blood-washed with tanks and machine guns in 1989 by CCP troops. After the Tiananmen massacre, the West imposed strict sanctions against the Chinese regime. Whether to make China's most favored nation status conditional on human rights was repeatedly debated in Congress, but the U.S. granted China the status every year in the 1990s.
There was also a view that if we had better relations with China, a stronger, more self-confident China, it would be an international stakeholder. I remember talking points that also it would open up China. If China was wealthier, it would move in the direction of democracy. This was the way that we could overcome the human rights advocates in Washington.
In 2000, Robert Rubin, then U.S. Treasury Secretary with a Wall Street background, facilitated the Clinton administration's support for the CCP to join the World Trade Organization.
If it had gone with a general moral standard, the U.S. should not have cooperated with a regime like the Chinese Communist Party. For example, we all know that South Africa had an apartheid system, but under strong pressure from the American people, American and other Western companies withdrew their capital from South Africa. This divestment actually led to the collapse of the apartheid regime and resulted in true democracy in South Africa. Now, American companies are obviously less concerned about human rights issues in China.
It is lower tariffs on a permanent basis rather than on an annual.
These exports have increased by about 7 times, and its GDP has increased by more than 4 times since its entry into the WTO.
And run by board of directors in China.
Why are we doing this? It's kind of a hard turn. We're doing some hard turns now, thanks to Trump and other white hats and other countries. They're pulling their manufacturing out of China. We've had to learn a long, hard lesson, not just the United States, but many other countries.
China. The CCP absolutely.
Hi.
The more CCP slash executives are controlling that company.
And as China grew more wealthy, and they started to develop their own indigenous companies and own indigenous industries, they turned to the Wall Street investment banks like Goldman Sachs and others to be listed on American stock exchanges. There was a problem there in that these Chinese companies don't play by the same rules that American companies play by. They don't open their books.
China does not allow U.S. regulators to audit its companies' books. The Chinese government claims these are state secrets and thus cannot be shared with the outside world.
It's just sickening. I'm not going to do anymore. I just know that these financial abuses and the way that China's played is criminal. We've got to come back and stop the abuses. And Trump is working on it more than any other president in the cabinet. But there are people on Wall Street that do not want it. There are people in the judicial system that do not want it. There are people in the federal government and D.C. that do not want it. This is a major problem. Roger Martin from Billings, Montana. Good day. Time to start thinking outside the box and find out what's really going on. And our media is complicit with this. Again, our media needs to be sued, needs to be changed, because we're not giving a straight shot for America first, or American policies, or American financial situation, or education. You're seeing the CCP and more of our universities are paying them off for top-notch research. You're seeing them stealing more of our trade secrets and technological secrets, and you're seeing them work on our education, our political system, our financial systems. This is a total war against China, and who's going to win, the United States or China? The dragon has many tentacles, and it's a full-out battle between the East and the West, between China and the United States. Good day. Wake up and see what's really going on. Again, this is Roger Martin from Billings, Montana. Good day. All right, to the Epic Times. Crossroads. Where did this virus really come from? And how does this deal with censorship? What's really going on
here? Act, but they recently got classified, 5 of them at least, as foreign missions of the Chinese Communist Party. In other words, branches of the Chinese government based on their structure. You know, does YouTube, does Twitter, do these different platforms, do they allow certain speech from these organizations that they would censor had someone else done it? Notably, yes, they have done this. YouTube, for example, has allowed Chinese Communist Party state-run media to publish open propaganda on its platform. For example, Xinhua, one of the main Chinese state-run media, was publishing these different viral-type videos promoting Chinese Communist Party conspiracy theories and different ideas, attacking the United States over the coronavirus. Were they doing that and allowing them to get those messages out, while at the same time censoring people who were promoting other ideas? For example, one of the main Chinese Communist Party narratives has been their claim saying that this virus came from the United States. They've been calling it the USA virus. They're claiming that the U.S. military brought it to China in October during the war games that they had in Wuhan. That's one.
This is another big question, and this is not the first time this has been brought up. I think the United States had a great deal of hand and a great deal of responsibility in creating this virus through the military labs and through universities. And the full story on this isn't out yet, and the news media, national network news media, is not covering this, unfortunately.
One of the big narratives they've been pushing, and yes, they have been able to say that on Twitter without getting censored. Was Twitter allowing these different state-run news outlets, these different foreign agents of the Chinese regime, to make those statements and not get censored? And while they were doing that, were they also censoring other, say, voices or outlets claiming other possible origins of the virus? Were other social media platforms doing that? And it says they'll also be looking at, quote, reliance on third-party entities, including contractors, media organizations, and individuals with indicia of bias to review content. And yes, and this has been happening. Notably, for example, the head of YouTube came out and said that they would be deleting content, deleting videos, if they go against WHO recommendations. Notably, Facebook announced similar policies when it comes to supporting the different narratives being promoted by the WHO when it comes to the new coronavirus, the CCP virus. Notably, the fact-checking organizations a lot of these platforms use do have very clear political bias. For example, Twitter was using, for example, to fact-check Trump, CNN, and other big, media that do have their viewpoints on Trump. And so, they got him here as well, possibly. We'll have to see whether they come out with that and whether they can actually do anything with it. But yes, a lot of the fact-checkers themselves do have very clear political bias. And it'll also be looking at, quote, acts that limit the ability of users with particular viewpoints to earn money on the platform compared with other users similarly situated. This does happen. Notably, the channel you're watching right now, we have been censored pretty heavily when it comes to advertisement. Now, here's how they do it a lot of times. They will initially, right from the get-go, ban advertisement on your videos. And because a lot of your initial traffic comes in right away, pretty much. A lot of the views on videos is from initial traffic. And the review process on videos to get the advertisement reapproved after it's been initially denied usually takes a couple days, and it needs to be done manually. On this channel, they often have renewed our advertising after we've contested it, but by that time, pretty much it's over with and you don't get any advertising money. The executive order also states that, quote, the Attorney General shall develop a proposal for federal legislation that would be useful to promote the policy objectives of this order. And so listen to this. So this means that in addition to going to the state attorney generals, these state level attorney generals to develop state law and proposals for state law that they can adopt, of course, if they so choose, they're also going to be looking at taking this executive order and developing federal law that will create similar protections like this. Of course, the federal government only has so much influence over state laws, but they are going to make recommendations and also get together the different state-level attorney generals for that. And so, in other words, this executive order will not just be a one-shot thing. It is the introduction of laws across the board, possibly across different states, and at least the federal government, that will basically solidify these protections on free speech on these different platforms. And here's something really interesting as well. The executive order also points to possible human rights violations involving these different social media platforms. Consistent, irrational, and groundless justifications to censor or otherwise restrict American speech here at home. Several online platforms are profiting from and promoting the aggression and disinformation spread by foreign governments like China. One United States company, for example, created a search engine for the Chinese Communist Party that would have blacklisted searches for human rights, hid data unfavorable to the Chinese Communist Party, and tracked users determined appropriate for surveillance. It also established research partnerships in China that provided direct benefits to the Chinese military. Other companies have accepted advertisements paid for by the Chinese government that spread false information about China's mass imprisonment of religious minorities, thereby enabling these abuses of human rights. And so again, possibility that some of these platforms have actually engaged in human rights abuses, or at least done things that supported human rights abuses being carried out by the Chinese Communist Party.
And yeah, we're going to end it here. The fact is this is going on. They're taking money from China. They're profiting from this selective use of media. And this is censorship in a real way, a powerful way, a profitable way. And what people are doing is they're not just waiting for the government. They're going to their own private groups and saying, let's join this group. We don't have to be censored. We can show what's going on. An example of this is London Real, but there's also another guy that's he has his own private groups, and he's getting support from corporations and groups to show those videos. So it's coming. It's coming. We're fighting back. It may take some time, but we're fighting back. We'll see how all this turns out in time. But the fact is, freedom of speech in the United States and China should not be so abused, especially in China and Hong Kong. We'll see. It's Roger Mark from Village, Montana. Good day.